Hey guys, it's Jeremy here on Metal Music Meltdown, back with another video. What have you today, guys? This is my next episode of my top 10 countries of each country. Sorry, top 10 bands of each country. I started off doing Canada, so definitely check out that video previously. And the next country I chose was right to the south of us, the US of A, another big country for metal. There's so many bands to pick from, it's hard to narrow it down to 10. And take in mind, guys, this isn't the definitive list of the top 10 bands of all time. These are my top 10 bands that I'm kind of listening to the most at the moment, or that I'm kind of dig the most or into the most. So there's going to be a lot of bands on here that you probably will be like, what the hell, why aren't these guys on there? Why aren't these guys on there? So it's just my top 10 bands I'm into the most at the moment, and I listen to the most with the highest rotation. So we'll leave it at that. At number 10, I have American thrash metal band from Denver, Colorado called Havoc. Newer breath of thrash metal band that's come out in the last since the 2000s. They're formed in 2004. Really love this band. The lead singer is one of my favorite thrash metal vocalists of all time. They just have a perfect blend of melody, but a lot of thrashy brutality as well. Really good band. I wanted to put one of the newer thrash bands on here that I really dig, and Havoc was the first one that came to mind. At number 9, I went with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Gotta love some Jimi. He only had 3 albums, unfortunately, but all 3 are classic. So many iconic tunes and epic guitar playing. Such an influential player and influence on many guitar players to come after him. He was, of course, from Seattle, Washington area, and just a killer guitarist, and love all his albums. At number 8, I went with a really new band that only had 2 albums, Power Trip. I normally don't try not to put bands that have very few albums or I don't have as much history with, but I love this band so much. Nightmare Logic is a top, if not 5, top 10 album of all time for me. And I just love this band. Love Riley Gale's aggressive vocals. He just sounds so angry, and he's got that hardcore vocal delivery. But the music is so thrashy and aggressive, but simpler riffs, but super heavy. Perfect crossover band. Like I said, they only had the 2 albums, but I just love those 2 albums so much. They're up here for me, and I listen to those albums more than almost any other band sometimes. I listen to them that much. So I had to make my list. A little bit lower on the list because I have less history with them and they have less material, but I had to put them on my list. Number 7, I have Death Angel. Great thrash band from the Bay Area, super underrated. Love most of their material. They're really good band. I'm not sure why they weren't bigger, to be honest with you. They're just as good as a lot of the big Bay Area thrash bands, but they just never really caught on quite the same. So stand-up albums for me. The Ultraviolence, the debut is fucking killer. When you take in mind the guys were only like 16 when they made that record. But all their albums are really solid. Even the last one, Humanicide, in 2019. So it's been like 5 years already. So I'm really dying for a new album from these guys. But all their stuff is killer. Act 3, Frolic Through the Park, sorry. Just some really killer albums from these guys. And probably one of the best live thrash bands I've ever seen. Like Slayer, okay, Slayer is one thing, but I love Testament, I love Exodus, spoiler alert coming up soon. Even Metallica, but Death Angel live fucking brings it, man. They put on a better show live than almost any thrash band I've ever seen. They always kill it. Really good band live. At number 6, I have the Mighty Slayer. Had to make my list. Love Slayer. My standard albums for them would be obviously Rain in Blood's a big one. Rain in Blood. Hell Awaits I love. Show No Mercies kind of has a more of a new wave of British heavy metal mixed with thrash metal vibes. Seasons of the Abyss, South of Heaven. Just some really good albums in the early material. And but Hell Awaits and Rain in Blood are fucking ridiculously good. And you can't have an American list without Slayer. They were so aggressive and brutal, and nobody sounded like them at the time, so fast, and killer band. Number 5 is a newer band, some of you might not be familiar with. It's the Chemists. They're a American doom metal band from, again, Denver, Colorado. Love this band. Probably my favorite new doom metal band in the whole scene. They had to make my list. I love all their albums. They only have 4 albums so far. My standard album by far is their album Hunted, which was in 2016. They put it out in 2015, 16, 18, and 2021. So I'm really hoping they have a new album coming out soon. But The Hunted, if you're not familiar with this band, check out Hunted. It'll blow your mind. It's amazing. And the title track of that album is probably a top 10 song of all time for me. It's that good. Really good doom metal band. Had to make my list. Number 4, one of my favorite thrash bands of all time, Exodus. Love Gary Holt, guitar riff master. Writes some of the most brutal and intense guitar riffs I've ever heard. Brutal, violent lyrics in the band always. Standout albums, Bonded by Blood by far is their best in my opinion. Pleasures of the Flesh is good. Fabulous Disasters, killer. Shovel-Headed Kill Machine's good. Temple of the Damned. Even the newer stuff that had Rob Dukes on vocals. The Electricity Exhibit A, Let There Be Blood was a re-release. Exhibit B, Blood In, Blood Out. Like even the newer stuff is really, really good. Really good thrash band. Only one weak album in my opinion, and the rest is all killer. Number 3, my favorite death metal band of all time, Simply Death. Love Chuck, rest in peace. He was a genius. Killer frontman, pioneered the whole death metal scene. Really good guitar player as well. Top to bottom, probably the best catalog in all of metal. Not a weak album, all 10 out of 10 albums. My favorites are Symbolic and Leprosy are my 2 favorites overall for sure. And then Sign of Perseverance, they're going more into a progressive sound, and I think that's where they would have gone if he was still around. But Love Death, my favorite, like I said, my favorite death metal band of all time, had to make it the top part of my list. Number 2, everyone knows Metallica. Metallica made my list this high, but just because of the role they played in my getting into metal. Like a lot of people, I got into metal in '91 when the Black Album came out. I was 12 years old. It was the first metal album I was really introduced to. Before that, I listened to grunge and alternative metal, and Metallica was like many people, was my gateway into metal. So I went back and listened to Ride the Lightning, Injustice for All, Master of Puppets. Was obsessed with Metallica for like 10 years. Drove my brother crazy. Saw them live every time they came to town. And after seeing them, I got into Testament, Exodus, Slayer, Death of the Angel, Overkill, all these other bands. And I never looked back. My taste has only gotten heavier in music since then. I dig some of their newer albums, but the early stuff is where it's at. The first 5 albums are masterpieces in my mind. But yeah, killer band, had to make the list. And for me, number 1 will be Testament. They're my second favorite band of all time in the metal scene. And yeah, so that had to be my number 1. I think they have the strongest discography in all of thrash metal in my opinion. I love all their albums. They don't have a weak album in my opinion. And in the 90s when a lot of bands did like that new metal sound, it went softer. Testament said, fuck that, we're making a heavier album. And they came in with Demonic, which was like a death metal album. So kudos to them for making that change. But my favorite albums from Testament, Legacy, The New Order is my number 1. Practice What You Preach, Souls of Black, the first 4 are killer. The Gathering is a top 1 for me as well. Really good album. Formation of Damnation is a fucking ridiculously good album as well. Killer thrash band. In terms of honorable mention, guys, I could be sitting here forever. But one band that really pained me to leave off my list was High on Fire. Having my favorite sludge metal band, they didn't quite make the list. Other thrash bands like Overkill, some newer bands like Warbringer didn't make my list. Those bands like Visigoth, a really new old school heavy metal band that's really good. And then you got the classic bands like Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, ZZ Top was a big one. But I have to pick 10 guys. So there's going to be a lot of bands that get left off. But these 10 bands are kind of the ones I listen to the most and I have the most history with. So that's how I decided. And of course the whole death metal scene too. Cannibal Corpse I fucking love too, but I'm more into thrash and traditional metal than death metal overall. That's why more death metal didn't make my list. Obituaries, killer as well. I love that old Florida death metal scene. Deicide. All those bands. I love the early death metal scene, but I only end up putting on death on my list overall. So guys, that's my list. Let me know down below what your top 10 for American bands would be. I'm sure there's bands I forgot, or maybe later I'll come across a band like, holy fuck, they should have made my list. But it is what it is. And let me know down below what country I should do next. I was thinking of jumping over to Europe and maybe doing like some of Finland, or Sweden would be a big one. They have a ton of good bands. Norway would be a big one. Denmark, any of those countries would be huge. Germany, of course. So let's stay tuned for our next country, guys. Let me know down below what I should do next. And keep it metal.